Yo, what's up YouTube? In this video I'll be going over 10 tips that I use to quickly climb with a win rate of 86% from Bronze 3 to Grandmaster, mainly playing Rocket. Okay, so tip number 1 is Rocket. Do not die. Now I know this sounds a lot like a no shit Sherlock thing, but hear me out. One of Rocket's most valuable tools as a support is his ability to revive teammates with his respawn beacon. And if he's the first one to die in a fight, then his beacon will just simply disappear, and Rocket will not spawn out the beacon. So while other support heroes can still be valuable to a teamfight, even if they're the first one to die, as long as they get enough value out of their abilities, Rocket's respawn only offers significant value if he's not the first one to die. Fortunately, however, for Rocket, his toolkit and even his tiny character model size gives you the resources required to stay out of danger and stay alive. Alright, so tip number 2 is to use his dashes to avoid being in dangerous situations. So this move is a pretty reliable way of avoiding the majority of ultimates in the game that would kill you, as long as you use it reactively. So for an example, if you hear Iron Man say his maximum pulse, you dash away. If you're in Psylocke ult, you just dash out of it. If you hear Punisher or Star-Lord ultimate, then you just dash to cover, etc, etc. The only ultimates that I find difficult to reactively dash out of would be Doctor Strange and Jeff, and this is simply because of how deceivingly large and fast these moves come out. So to counter Jeff's ults, once you hear the first voice line of his ult, when he goes underneath, I find it best to put some space between you and your teammates. If you do end up getting swallowed though, don't worry too much though, because you can often still use your dash and climb ability to make it back to the stage. Now with Doctor Strange's ultimate, if you try dashing away from him when he uses his ultimate, and you're already close-ish to him to start with, you will probably still get hit by it just because of how large the area is and the speed in which it goes out. If you do get hit with this, then 99% of the time you will get one-shotted by his explosion ability afterwards. So it's super important to avoid this as Rocket. The way you do this is keep a mental tab in your head of when Strange likely has his ultimate ready. When you think he does have it ready, pay special attention to Strange's positioning and his movement. It's very easy to tell when a Strange intends to ult because they'll often do telegraphed movements such as pushing past your frontline, usually with his float ability, before popping their ult. Always maintain a safe distance away from the enemy Strange once they can use their ult, and you should be safe. Tip number 3. Mix in wall climbs in your movement to make yourself harder to hit and to allow you to heal from a high vantage point. Rocket actually moves significantly faster on the wall compared to if he's on the ground. Something I'll often do is if I'm being focused by a diving duelist, such as Psylocke or Black Panther, I'll use my dash to get towards a wall and then I'll start wall climbing away until I am safe. Rocket can also use his wall climb to gain the ability to heal from high ground. So you could climb up to a high point and then use your float ability to heal while you're in midair. This is useful if you need to heal your team while avoiding short-range duelists such as Magic or Black Panther, or if you have a teammate get stuck behind a wall. Tip number 4. Avoid being in sightlines of sniping or hit scan type duelists such as Hawkeye or Hela. If possible, try to prioritize banning these characters. But if you do end up fighting them, the most important thing you can do to stop getting killed is to avoid their line of sight as much as possible and to stay behind cover. If you do not respect their sightlines, you risk dying so quick that you can't even dash away to safety in time. Fortunately, you can still heal your team around walls by using the wall bounce property of your heal. So use this to heal your teammates if there is a long-range hit scan type character on the enemy team. Tip number 5. Play around your Punisher or Winter Soldier synergy. This damage boost that your teammates get from this synergy is kind of insane in my opinion, and anytime you have this ability off cooldown, you'll want to look for opportunities to use this ability to get kills. If possible, try to place your ammo beacons around corners so that your teammate can use it to push either aggressively or to peel back defensively if needed. One thing I'd like to note about this ability is that it will not affect Punisher when he's in his ult or in his turret form. Because of this, ideally you should look for opportunities to use this when he's not in his turret mode or when he does not have his ult. Tip number 6 would be do not be tempted to stay on Groot's shoulder, even if you have the synergy available. One of the biggest mistakes I'll see Rocket players do is default to being on Groot's shoulder. I know it can be tempting to just sit on his shoulder the entire game, since it feels pretty badass to do it, but in practice though, I find that it really just ends up putting you in unnecessary danger by positioning you in front of the front line with your tank. I don't think the 35% damage reduction you get from it is enough to make up for the fact that you're in the front line when you do this. In my experience, the best way to use this team up is to treat it as an extra dash. The range you can use this ability is actually pretty far, so using it as a way to escape duelists diving you when you're in the backline, and forcing those duelists to get close to your tank if they wish to pursue chasing you down, is the best way to use this ability. Tip number 7, be smart with Rocket's ultimate. In my opinion, it is one of the strongest teamfight ultimates in the game. Use it at the start of a big teamfight to get maximum value. You definitely do not want to waste this ultimate on a fight that your team can reliably win without it. The ultimate causes a huge momentum shift and will single-handedly make your team win fights. This beacon has a lot of health, so I find the best way to position it is simply just put it in the middle of where you want your teammates to fight. Tip number 8, jump a lot. This serves two purposes for Rocket. One, it makes you much more difficult to hit as it's more difficult for the enemy to keep their crosshair on top of you. And reason number 2 is to avoid having your orb bounce off the ground. Since Rocket is a very short character, his projectile will often just hit the ground if you are shooting your orb across different elevations. Because this game is a third-person shooter, where your crosshair is does not necessarily mean that's where your shot will go. So jump often and shoot your heal when you're high enough in your jump. Tip number 9, be a heal bot. You mostly just want to act as a heal bot and refrain from using a primary fire often. However, there are some situations that I think using your primary fire would be more useful, so I'll go over them now. Situation 1, anytime your team doesn't need your healing, so if your team is fully healed and not taking damage, then you can use your primary fire. A common scenario this will happen in is if your other supports such as a Luna Snow uses their ultimate, and that alone is able to keep your team fully healed. Situation 2, using your gun to break enemy abilities such as Moon Knight's Unks, Loki's clones, Namor's octopus turrets, etc. These abilities tend to become more impactful the longer they stay up, so it's super important to do your part in helping destroy these whenever possible. Situation 3. To finish off a kill on a target that's low on health. It's important to secure these kills whenever possible, and sometimes your extra little bit of damage will be the reason that an enemy dies or does not. Situation 4. To defend yourself and your fellow backline heroes. If you and another backline hero are being dived by an enemy, oftentimes you and your ally can team up together to either get the enemy diver to back off, or you may be able to kill them if they overextend. Situation 5. To help your team nuke specific targets. If like an enemy Hela, Scarlet Witch, Punisher, or whatever is ulting your team, and you just need to kill them as soon as possible, then contributing your damage to this can be helpful. Just don't get too carried away with this. You do not want to die just because you decided to help too much in shooting the enemies. And finally, tip number 10, using the respawn beacon effectively. You want to keep this beacon up and relatively close by during team fights. The best way to position this beacon is out of sight and away from where the enemies will be. Just be careful that you don't place it too far that it doesn't revive your teammates because it does have a 50-meter radius. One thing to note is how the cooldown scales with the health of the beacon when it's recalled. At most, if it revives someone or if it gets destroyed, the cooldown will become 45 seconds. If you recall it when it's taken no damage, the cooldown becomes only 5 seconds. And if you recall it when it's taken some damage, the cooldown will be between 5 to 45 seconds. Because of this cooldown mechanic, if your beacon is found and or is in danger of getting destroyed, you should recall it and reposition it so that it's hidden again. Well, that's it for the video. This was my first attempt at making a guide, and so if you have any feedback with the video, I'd appreciate it if you comment those below. If this video gets enough traction, I may consider doing a VOD review of one of my games as Rocket, where I go through my thought process as I play it. My next goal is to get Eternity rank, so if you're interested in watching me go for this, then feel free to tune into my streams on Twitch, which is linked in the description below. If you learned something from this video, I'd appreciate it if you liked, commented, and subscribed, as well as share this with your strategist friends that also want to play Rocket. Thank you for watching and have a pleasant rest of your day.